Another exciting edition of Culxure Conversations. My name is Kudakwashe Takundo, in Ndebele Crash Elingumkoma. On this week's edition, we are joined by the world's most famous artist, a man who dared to be bold. He has over the years stood up for freedom of expression in Zimbabwe. We welcome Owen Maseko. He is fresh from Copenhagen in Denmark. Put us.
I see
Copenhagen. I hope I'm getting the name correct.
Yeah, you say Copenhagen in Denmark. Yeah. I think it was a brilliant seminar, I have to say.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Get to take job with Chinchikade.
Because so dying up
Gunzima, where feel
Gunzima, I don't pepper to Moyom.
Hey, Siavonga put us on Mogubalat. So, first things first, tell us about your early life. Where were you born? Where did you grow up?
I was born in Philabosi, in Caesar, and then pretty much I grew up in Bulawayo.
Okay.
And Bulawayo ngikhulela eNtumbane. As we all know, eNtumbane kwakuyi army camp. Ngesikhathi sakhona ngama-1980s. So ngazalwa ngo-1975, so before independence.
Oh, okay.
So lathi sangena ku-independence lokho esingobonana sibancane kodwa sasesikhulakhulile ngesikhathi kusenzakala igugu round. So okunye kwakhona sakubona. This is where you understand now how the mind captures some of those memories, no matter how small one is. So during that time, in 1983, I was about 7 or 8 years old, but
oh, okay, all right. So, Owen Fundengapi, singakafiki ku art and everything that you have done.
Uyabona thina ngesikhathi esakhula ngaso vela abazali babesithi emdingeleni indawo eduze khonapho kwenza ukuthi siyabe simbone siye esikole ephenduka. So isikolo kwakungasonto yayi-complicated, so ngafunda khonapho duze la ngikhaya eNtabeni primary school.
Okay.
Then later ngasemfunda eNtumbane secondary school. Then for my art career, that's when I went to Mzilikazi Art and Craft Center in Mzilikazi.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. So i-art iqalisele kusiphi isibanga empilweni yakho?
I-art ayiqalisanga, i-art yayivela ikhona ke manje ngoba i-talent le-art lona ngokwalo, you are born with it, you can't really acquire it at some point. Unfortunately thina ku-society esikhula kiyo, i-art is for abantu abayihlulekileyo, abantu abangakwanisiyo esikolo and so on. So i-art kayiqakathekiswa, though ngangiyaziwa ngikhaya la ku-society lasesikolo ukuthi ngiyakwazi ukudweba, kodwa kwakuyinto leyana ukuthi la u-Owen Maseko othanda ukudrotsha. So it was always like that. It was up until sengiqeda uform 4 eNtumbane secondary, where you know nxa selingama-school leavers, there you are, what do we do? So likhulile phela, so fanele lenze something. Then yikho lapho sizichomi nje. We used to play chess a lot emgelweni, sibala lama-newspaper. You know abafana babefundile libala emgelweni, very libala i-newspaper khonaphana. Then it happened ukuthi at some point sagcina sesiphuma amajida, abanye besiyayenza imoto mechanics, abanye besiyayenza izinto ezitshiyetshiyeneyo, abanye kuthiwa yi-plumbing, plumber, whatever pronunciation ngokwamapipe amanzi. Then that's where mina engahamba khona eMzilikazi Art and Craft Center.
All right.
That was back in 1994.
For how long were you at the craft?
I was supposed to be there for only 1 year, 6 months. And then because now we are above 18 during that time, course I ran for only 1.5 years. Then now below 18, that was 3 years. I think I went there when I was literally almost 18, somewhere around there. Then it happened that I stayed there for 7 years instead.
Oh, okay. So, what were you now doing?
So initially in Mzilikazi Art and Craft Center, you learn all disciplines, which are fine art, basically drawing and painting, and then you do wood and stone carving, you do pottery, where you then you do ceramics, then you do commercial art, which they now call graphic designing. But at that time, graphic designing yayimanual like uyabona isayini ye-Coca-Cola lana
Eh.
awuyibhala ngebrush like kwakungala ukuthi iyaprintwa ku-vinyl
Oh, okay.
or whatever. Uyabona izitendi zonke lezayo ze-trade fair sasizenza manual konke amabala owabonayo. I worked a lot during the trade fair times prepare izitendi zonezana. So that's how manual graphic designing was.
Right.
So now once evolve so the technology change. So wawusithi ungafunda, then after that you specialize in one of the genres. But unfortunately for me, I was one of those students who was quite good at all the
No, you're quite good.
The reason why I say that is ukuthi ama-teacher wonke ayesifundisa ayengifuna.
Okay.
So yikho ngabakwazi khona ukuthi hayi kusho ukuthi ngiyafunakala ku-ceramics, ngiyafunakala ku-fine art, ngiyafunakala ku-stone carving. So in a way luckily ngagcina sengi-absorbwa ku-production department because iMzilikazi Craft Center was split into isikolo then lalapho kwakusetshenzwa khona-ke ukubunjwa khona amankomitsho to make a living out of it. So sasisebenza nge-commission usitsho ukuthi nxa ukuthi inkomitsho yayi-10 cents ungabumba angu-100, that's multiplied by 10 cents. It was commission based.
Okay.
I think ukusebenza kwakhona kwakukarigiri zazibuya hayi kancane.
Oh, okay. Quite an interesting one. But you're also good with ceramics. I think it's one of your strongest points.
Yeah. Well, ukubumba, I think with me as an artist, I do like quite a lot of genres or all genres that are there because I'm a highly experimental kind of person. So I easily get bored if I stick to one thing. So ceramics is one of the things that I literally jumped into, and I've got a ceramic studio complete with all the ovens for firing, all the potter's wheel now. So like it's a complete studio.
All right, talking about being easily bored if you continuously do something, is it why you started doing music?
I think the music thing is quite interesting because there was a time, maybe I can now introduce the issue of my exhibition Sibato Ntisele, so that I can relate to how music came into being.
Okay.
So let's say during that time when I got arrested, so I kind of got isolated. All your friends start, disappearing, and sometimes close people in your life, except of course your family. But this isolation brought about, loneliness and all those things. So at some point I picked up a guitar and then downloaded some guitar lessons. That's how I learned how to play a guitar. So I had all the time. In a way, so it was some kind of a let out, but in the end, my painting started developing sound. I started writing music, and I started, thinking in sounds. So that's how my music part came into being.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you are a self-taught guitarist.
Yeah, I am a self-taught guitarist. I suppose even with the visual arts is the same way, same approach that I had, because at Mzilikazi Craft Center it was a non-academic. They didn't care whether you had passed your O level or you were in Form 2 or grade 7 or even never gone to school. All they needed was for you to have a talent. So I think basically my background is talent-driven and it's very practical. So I don't sell art in Omlomo. I sell art in petty art that I've produced.
It's an interesting one. So let's go back to you picking up bullets during the genocide in Tumbani. How then does it translate to your art or your art experience?
I think as an artist growing up, as a young person, and then as an adult later, all those memories that have been kept to me naturally came through my drawings and through my art. And when it comes to the Sibato Ntisele exhibition, it was very interesting because there was a time when I went and visited, I think I was in the UK, and I had gone for an art craft fair where they were showing old cars, we were selling our art. And then at some point, there were these aeroplanes that came hovering up above the sky, going, ooh. Then I think it was in 2008 or if not 2009. So when these aeroplanes came hovering up the sky, they instantly reminded me of the plane that hovered above the sky back then in 1983. Plane then I was saying, I think they were Dakota planes, those small tiny ones, very noisy, and it was a low flying one. So that memory was triggered there and then. So when everyone was cheering, enjoying themselves, all those memories, it made me sad because I didn't think that I still remembered that.
Okay.
In Bulawayo today or in Matebelen today, if you say Selikonjolozeli, literally almost everyone remembers that plane. So from that day, then I started doing some sketches in my sketchbook of the images that I saw when I was young and stories that are being told around, or stories that are being told in the dark, because no one wants to talk about Kukuraund. So it means I started 2 years before the actual exhibition in 2010.
Okay.
So those sketches and that aeroplane triggered this particular exhibition.
Okay, on your road to that exhibition, before, did anyone say, Owen, don't exhibit this? Or and then?
I think maybe I was a little bit lucky because I approached this exhibition like I naturally do with my everyday art. It never really occurred to me that I'm really doing something quite controversial or that can be quite disturbing. But the people around me could easily have been aware, but luckily then the director at the gallery was Voditewe. I think Voditewe, because he's a creative human being in his own right as an artist, he took the artistic creative thought process of my exhibition as opposed to thinking it's a political issue. So I think that on its own, it was a bonus for me to have a director who thinks like that. Because most people would actually react politically because they are employed by the government. I think he had a different stance altogether. I think both of us realized when we were sitting in a jail cell that, oh, really, this is what has happened now.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. Although I understand it was not your first time having a brush with the powers be, I understand in 2003 there's something that happened. There's some exhibition that you did. You can take us back then. I'm terrible to remembering dates. I'm sure it was somewhere around there. So I did this art piece which I put at the gallery called One Fool at a Time. And it was these figures that were trying to use the toilet at the same time. Okay.
So I was asked to take it out of the show, and it didn't really mean much to me. I thought, well, life goes on, you know. But I was beginning to be this guy who was commenting on sensitive issues, because later I also did the barber shop.
Okay.
But the barber shop was the barber shop as in father.
Oh,
so it was an installation of this figure in a dark room, quite suffocating because I had done it in plastic. So if you go in, you suffocate. So it was the kind of barber shop that when you go in, you don't get to choose the haircut you want. You are cut according to the barber that is there. So that was one of the exhibitions that I did. And I also did the point of view, which was basically about the Murambatsvina issue, the demolition of the houses and all that. Then I also did the one of the toilets, where, you know, it was about the votes and how people react to public toilets, where there is some kind of communication in the public toilet where someone comes and writes vote ZANU, someone says vote MDC. So there is a conversation building up. I'm not going to talk what medium they are using to write.
Oh, okay.
So that was to capture that. So it was quite, So I've had, you know, exhibitions that were really quite, you know, disturbing before the 2010 one, the December 27. So
your eventual arrest in 2010, how did that then shape Owen as an artist? How did that make you, that experience? Yakwenza waba njani njengo-Owen?
Well, I wish I was an ordinary man, to be honest. Sometimes where you just wake up and walk on the streets of Bulawayo, no one recognizes you. I really wish I was like that. I had a great life then, but now we have to, to be recognized. But sometimes there is the positive and the negative about my arrest. The negative part is the isolation and also being, not being able to do exhibitions anymore in Zimbabwe.
Sure.
And it's always, the gallery or any institution is quite hard in terms of wanting me to do a write-up or trying to convince that this time, I'm coming, I'm just doing my art. So now it's a constant struggle to try to convince people, how am I going to work? Everyone is curious. What is it that we are going to be presenting this time? Everyone gets scared. Everyone gets worried to associate with me in their projects. So that on its own, is becoming more and more difficult to do any work locally. But the big bonus as well is that, I get to travel. I get to, to exhibit outside the country. And that on its own, many artists would want to do that. So this is the positive as well. And also the other most important thing as well is the people can now trust me.
Okay.
You get people from the streets or anyone who recognizes me that will tell me a story or their story about their experiences of Culxure.
Okay.
So in a way, I'm kind of this guy who is now some kind of trusted someone that people can tell, but also it's quite heavy on me because you get to have all these stories of people's experiences as much as I have also my own experiences. So it's kind of the positive and the negative. So I need to kind of strike a balance at some point.
So it has come with advantages and disadvantages. Okay, let's look at issue here, freedom of expression as an artist in Zimbabwe. Are artists free? And what should be done? Who should listen to artists in order for them to have that freedom in their work?
I don't think we will ever have freedom of expression as an artist, even if we are given 1 million years. Because artists are not supposed to work against what the government thinks or what someone is thinking. I think as a creative human being, you need to be honest to yourself first and then understand what you are also doing, as opposed to think what people are going to be thinking about your work. Because when you start doing that, then you start self-censoring yourself. The moment you start self-censoring yourself, then you align or you conform to certain systems. For me, I think when I go into the studio, it's about me, myself, and I. That's how I create. So whatever comes after, how people interpret or misinterpret my artwork, it's not my responsibility. I'm not saying I'm a careless human being, but I'm saying if you have to be a creative human being, just go where no one will ever try to go. Because that's the whole point of being creative. The imagination, the ability to provoke conversations, the ability to provoke dialogue, the ability to also engineer certain way of thinking for a people, for a particular, a society, especially ours. And also is the whole idea of how do you tell stories using your art? Because we are all telling our stories in our everyday life. So if you have to use your art, just use it to the maximum. Don't just waste time in thinking, so and so is going. And also a lot of people are now, thinking if you do art, you get arrested. No, you don't.
Okay.
You don't get arrested. Someone decides to arrest you. The act will never get you arrested. It's the system.
It's the system.
Yeah.
So looking at Culxure, what do you wish the government to do? Like you have been so vocal about it and looking Sisia Pambili, what do you wish to see changed?
I think the most important thing about the Culxure issue or these atrocities that were committed by our government, it's unfortunate that the perpetrators are still in very powerful positions. What we need first, before anything else, is to be able to talk about Culxure. That space for us to be able to say, I was a victim or I lost this, for people to open up and So we have to be free enough to know that if I say something about Kukuranda, I'm not going to be arrested.
Yes.
Then everything else might follow, whether there is an apology, whether there is compensations, whether there is, all sorts of, whether there is a museum about it or memorialization, and all these things are secondary. But the most important thing, which I think is problematic, is that we are still afraid to talk about Kukuranda.
Yeah, so true. We are in fear. Vele
Yeah,
we
we are in
service.
fear, we are
So
service.
ukuthi siyathi suka khona apha betiya ande wakomani. It's one thing that is interesting about Owen is the only thing that people think of Owen when Owen Maseko is mentioned is your pieces that talk about the genocide. But there are so many things that we do. Like earlier on, we touched a bit on your music. Like that you are now doing music. You are also a publisher of books.
Yeah.
Can you take us through that part?
I think when I also went through that moment of isolation for about more than 5 years, I also, I've always been one person that has always loved children's books. And animation and all that. So because I'm not a very much of an educated person, but in Zimbabwe if you go through grade 7 you can pretty much read and write.
Yeah.
So because my strength is in drawings, so I prefer to write children's books. So I've written a couple of children's books and I'm working on a few. So because they are more pictorial and there's less text, so it's easy for me to actually manage. But also, I'm a big fan of authors and writers and poets and all that. So at some point in my studio, I was inspired to actually produce books because the word publishing is quite a heavy word on its own. Like if we say you are running a publishing house, people think of all these huge machines and everything. But I simplify it to this: can we actually make books?
Okay.
A book that is physical, you can open and do that. So I gave that space because I felt, writers were struggling to actually be published by these very famous publishing houses. But actually, you can actually produce books as you sell them, as opposed to produce millions of copies. So that's where the Owen Maseko publishers kind of came in to accommodate all these writers and poets that were trying to kind of come up with their writings to be published.
Oh,
so yeah,
it's actually an important part because abantu abaningi nxa becabanga uMaseko bayabe kuthiwa kungathiwa Owen Maseko bese beqedisa ngokuthi it again.
Yeah, ngoba kwesinkathi these cups esinathela kiyo amankomitsho lawo. I also make those as well.
Oh, okay.
So I know how to do amankomitsho afayo lawa efakwe display in cooler that we never used, but nowadays our producer will use them every day.
So, okay. All right.
So ngawufuna inkomitsho etiye hayi uyabuya koMaseko.
Ngilobhuru wami omunye ngemva kwecamera lapho uthanda kabi itiye. I'll make a plan.
Hayi ko right yena kumele abuye letiye mina ngizabuya lamankomitsho.
Oh. All right. Oh, and over the past few years you have also kind of relocated to ekhaya. Kwenzakalani lapho koMaseko?
The idea of ekhaya is very interesting in the sense that because where I live or wherever I live, my space, my wife and I's space always ends up becoming an arts hub.
Okay.
Where I have people and young and old artists and some of my friends that are artists always come to the house. We end up having some kind of informal studios and all that, everyone coming to work with me and all that, because I do quite a lot of genres. So I get to attract quite a lot of different people as well. So I ended up calling it Maseko Cultural Village at Dolopeni.
Okay.
Right? Then because people have too many choices at Dolopeni. People can go and record under the mattress, people can go and record in their friend's bedroom and so on and on. So I felt at some point we needed a space that was a little bit open and with people that desperately needed those kind of spaces. So that's when I decided to move to the rural areas where I know when you come up with this Owen Maseko cultural village ekhaya. You know, people are desperately in those spaces, and it's coming up well because I brought a different energy to the rural community for young people. Instead of spending so much time in Natinjengu, at least they have something to do. They will have to come and learn how to tell stories, how to do dance, how to do ceramics and pottery and all that. Unfortunately, COVID was not really helping over the past few years, so we kind of stopped doing these activities.
Oh, okay. All right.
So things are picking up now, so I'm hoping to do more programs with Maseko Cultural Village.
Okay.
Yeah.
So besides this, what else is Owen working on at the current moment?
I have to say I've kind of rebranded and said I'm now, I don't know whether it's a project or it's an Owen, or because it's difficult to separate my projects from me. I call it OMAM, Owen Maseko Artist Movement.
Okay.
So the idea is to conscientize artists to, Maseko Artist Movement is about using art as a tool for fighting for human rights. So the whole idea of OMAM is to create that movement and create that impact. And to conscientize the artists how much power we have. So this is the whole idea that we are bringing at the moment.
Okay, so for an ordinary artist who is watching this and would love to say one day, I would love to be at a stage as Owen Maseko, or I would love to express myself like Owen does. What encouraging words can you say to that person?
I think the most critical thing or artists need to learn is to work. Just work.
Okay.
Because if you are lazy, nothing will come to you. So everything starts from working and being honest with yourself in terms of your work and choosing your subject well as well. If you decide to comment around or about your society, just get in there, be full on, ukwenze kuphelele. Abantu baduma ngokuthi bayenza izinto buqamuqamu. Plus enye into abantu okumele beyibalekele, especially young artists of today, ikubuza ukuthi kule mali yini.
All right.
Yeah, sonke senzela imali, lami nginje ngenzela imali, kodwa imali ku-art ibuya ngokusebenza, ibuya ngemva kwesikhathi. Abanye babe befuna ukuthi umuntu etefikile namuhla ahla afike e-art gallery kumbe ahla exhibit ahla yenzi 1 million ahla abe famous. So antu yabona ukuthi konoko kumele bebe patient as well and be fearless and work hard.
That reminds me of ukuthi when you got your first paycheck here at, what did you do with it?
That was actually very interesting because I think I sold my first painting 3 or 4 years after my art school lessons. I had already graduated and was still struggling. And I think I sold that one and I was able to buy some shoes. Alazi tennis lela watu walibamba. Yeah, lilo la liku fashion ngesikhathi sakho. So yili tennis engalithenga ukuthi walibamba, and I remember I also bought some food as well. So vele ngesikhathi sana it was my life was simply, it was about the bumper, lo kudla kuphela. I mean, I could afford that painting yakho, and luckily I've got a picture of that first painting that I sold in my life. Umkhiyo ngikhona, I think UK. He sent it back to me because ngamnika i-address yentumbane wayithumela i-actual photo. I still have the photo. Kwakuyizindlu zemakhaya, izindlu zemakhaya zonezana kwakuyi-watercolor painting, kulokuzinkukhu laphana kugijima lani. So wambhikitsha ngamajidi ami esasifunda sonke ngiyibambile. So I still have that memory with me. So it was the first painting in my life to be sold.
How did you feel about it that time?
I mean, it's a very beautiful feeling because you now realize that, someone can actually appreciate out there. It's the very same thing that I am telling the young artists today, the gallery, because I'm also, I forgot to say, the chairperson of the Visual Artists Association of Bulawayo.
Okay.
So, like when you are pricing your artwork, especially for these first-time exhibitors, it's important for them to not make their art very expensive, so that they have that feeling that I had. It's not about selling a lot of about selling big monies.
Yes,
It's about knowing that someone bought a painting from you. That feeling on its own is enough encouragement for you to wake up every day to want to be an artist.
Quite an interesting one there. Owen, siyabonga ukuthi ubuye wabalathi namuhla.
Hayi kuhle kakhulu, ngibonga kakhulu.
Sizathu ukuvakatsha sibuye evillage koMaseko.
Hayi kuyabe kuhle kakhulu.
Yeah, so that was another episode of Culxure Conversations, brought to you by Veins Media, Kasi Audio Works, Kairos Mills, and Solid Sound. Remember to subscribe to our channel and follow us across social media platforms at Culxure Make. Siyabonga.